There was a time when BlackBerry wasn't just a phone. It was a status symbol. Politicians used it, business executives used it, celebrities used it. And for millions of people, owning a BlackBerry meant you were connected to the world. Its most recognizable feature was the physical keyboard. Every message could be typed quickly. Every email could arrive instantly. And BlackBerry's famous notification light meant you always knew when something important had arrived. By the mid-2000s, BlackBerry looked unstoppable. But then, something changed. The phone stopped being just a phone. It became a computer. And BlackBerry wasn't ready for what came next. BlackBerry was created by a Canadian company called Research in Motion, or RIM. The company was founded in 1984 by Mike Lazaridis and Douglas Freegan. At first, RIM wasn't trying to build the world's most popular smartphone. It was focused on wireless communication. Then came the idea that would transform the company: email. At a time when checking email usually meant sitting in front of a computer, BlackBerry allowed people to receive messages directly on a mobile device. That was revolutionary. Instead of waiting until you reached the office, your emails followed you everywhere. For businesses, this was incredibly valuable. BlackBerry became synonymous with productivity, and its secure communication system made it especially popular with governments, corporations, and professionals. BlackBerry had found its advantage, but that advantage would eventually become its weakness. By the late 2000s, BlackBerry was everywhere. The company had millions of subscribers around the world. Its devices were considered essential tools for professionals. And then there was BlackBerry Messenger. BBM became a cultural phenomenon. People weren't just using BlackBerry phones for work anymore. They were using them to communicate with friends. Messages could be sent instantly. Read receipts told you when someone had received your message, and the famous BlackBerry keyboard made typing feel effortless. BlackBerry had created an ecosystem around communication. But while BlackBerry was winning the messaging battle, another company was changing the entire definition of a smartphone. In 2007, Apple introduced the iPhone. At first, BlackBerry didn't seem worried. The iPhone didn't have a physical keyboard. Its touchscreen was unfamiliar. And BlackBerry executives believed serious business users would continue to prefer physical buttons. But Apple was playing a different game. The iPhone wasn't designed simply to make phone calls and emails easier. It was designed to put a computer in your pocket. Then came the App Store, and this changed everything. Suddenly, the value of a smartphone wasn't determined only by its hardware. It was determined by what the software could do. You could download applications for communication, entertainment, navigation, photography, banking, games, and almost anything else. The smartphone was becoming a platform, and BlackBerry was still thinking like a phone company. BlackBerry's biggest strength was also becoming its biggest weakness. The company had built its identity around security, email, messaging, and the physical keyboard. Those features had made BlackBerry successful. But consumers were beginning to want something different. They wanted large screens. They wanted better cameras. They wanted games. They wanted applications. They wanted websites to work properly. And most importantly, they wanted a phone that felt like a computer. BlackBerry software struggled to compete with Apple's iOS and Google's Android. Developers increasingly focused their attention on those platforms. And without developers, the BlackBerry ecosystem became less attractive. It was a dangerous cycle. Fewer users meant fewer developers. Fewer developers meant fewer applications. And fewer applications meant fewer reasons for users to choose BlackBerry. The strange thing is, BlackBerry wasn't completely blind to what was happening. The company understood that smartphones were changing. It tried to respond. BlackBerry introduced touchscreen devices. It developed new software. It launched the BlackBerry Playbook tablet. And eventually, it created a completely new operating system called BlackBerry 10. But the problem was timing. The smartphone market was moving incredibly fast. Apple was improving the iPhone. Android manufacturers were releasing new devices constantly. And consumers were becoming comfortable with touchscreen phones. BlackBerry was trying to catch up to an industry that was already moving ahead. There was another issue inside the company. BlackBerry's leadership was divided. Mike Lazaridis was deeply connected to the company's technology. Jim Balsillie focused heavily on business and growth. Together, they had helped turn BlackBerry into a global success. But as the market changed, the company struggled to make decisive moves. BlackBerry's culture had been built around what had already worked, and that made radical change difficult. The company had become extremely successful at making one type of product. The problem was, the market no longer wanted only that product. Then the numbers started telling the story. BlackBerry's market share began falling rapidly. Customers moved toward iPhones and Android devices. Developers abandoned the platform, and the company's once powerful reputation began to disappear. In 2013, BlackBerry announced massive job cuts. The company was losing billions of dollars. Its attempt to recover with BlackBerry 10 had failed to reverse the decline. The company that had once dominated the smartphone market was now fighting simply to remain relevant. It was one of the most dramatic collapses in the history of consumer technology. Eventually, BlackBerry stopped trying to compete directly with Apple and Android. The company changed its strategy. Instead of focusing on making smartphones, BlackBerry moved towards software and cybersecurity. And in 2016, BlackBerry announced that it would stop designing its own smartphones. The BlackBerry brand continued to appear on phones produced by other companies for a while, but the original BlackBerry smartphone era was effectively over. The company that had once defined mobile communication had left the smartphone hardware business. So what actually killed BlackBerry? It wasn't one bad phone. It wasn't simply the iPhone, and it wasn't because the company couldn't innovate. The real problem was that BlackBerry misunderstood what customers were buying. BlackBerry believed people wanted a better communication device. Apple and Android showed consumers that they wanted a pocket computer. That difference was enormous. BlackBerry optimized the old smartphone. Apple helped redefine the new one. And by the time BlackBerry understood the shift, the market had already moved. BlackBerry's story teaches a powerful business lesson. Success can become dangerous when it convinces a company that the future will look like the past. The physical keyboard wasn't a bad idea. Email wasn't a bad idea. Security wasn't a bad idea. BlackBerry actually did many things extremely well. But being good at yesterday's market doesn't guarantee success in tomorrow's market. Technology doesn't wait. Consumers don't wait. And competitors don't wait. The companies that survive are usually the ones willing to destroy what made them successful before someone else does it for them. BlackBerry didn't disappear because it was stupid. It disappeared because it was extremely good at solving yesterday's problem, while the world was already asking a completely different question. And that may be the most important part of the BlackBerry story, because sometimes the biggest threat to a successful company isn't its competitors. It's the success that made it successful in the first place.